I never expected fairness from my parents. Not really. Growing up, I learned early that in our house, love was distributed like dessert. My sister got the full plate, and I was allowed the crumbs if I behaved quietly enough. Still, nothing prepared me for the day they gifted her a BMW with a glowing red bow stretched across the hood like a celebration banner for her entire existence. The sunlight reflected off the polished surface so brightly that it almost hurt to look at. A crowd of relatives, neighbors, and family friends stood around cheering, clapping as if she had just saved the world. And there I was, standing 2 steps behind everyone, as invisible as always, pretending their applause didn't echo in the hollowness of my chest. My sister, Leela, screamed when the car keys were placed in her hands. She ran around the vehicle, opening doors, inspecting the seats, hugging my parents like they had given her life itself. My mother wiped tears from her eyes as she told anyone who would listen, "She deserves it. She's been through so much." My father patted her back proudly. They practically glowed with joy. And I just stood there. I thought maybe, just maybe, they would look at me next, acknowledge me, say something like, "We have a surprise for you too," or even, "We're proud of you as well." I didn't expect a car. I didn't expect anything big, just something. Instead, when most of the excitement died down and everyone drifted toward the outdoor tables for brunch, my father finally approached me. He didn't look excited. He didn't look emotional. He looked inconvenienced, as if talking to me took effort he didn't want to give. He reached into his wallet, thumbed through a stack of bills, and pulled out 2 wrinkled dollars. He pressed them into my hand without making eye contact. "For you," he said. "Bus money. You can get yourself something later if you want." I stared at those $2, wondering if this was some kind of bizarre joke, a test, a prank, anything. But my father had already turned away, his attention back on my sister, who was now taking pictures leaning against her brand new BMW like she was posing for a magazine cover. I looked over at my mom for some kind of explanation. She offered none. She just shook her head slightly as if warning me not to make a scene. She whispered, "Let your sister enjoy her moment. Don't ruin this day for her." Ruin her day? Her day was a $40,000 car with leather seats and my parents' unconditional love wrapped around it like a bow. And mine was $2 and a reminder that I was an afterthought. The imbalance wasn't new, but that day, it became unbearable. I swallowed hard, forcing down the bitterness like something poisonous I wasn't ready to spit out yet. I walked away from the noise, the cheers, the camera flashes, and went inside the house. It felt colder than usual, quieter, like a place that wasn't mine anymore. In my room, I closed the door and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the 2 bills still in my hand. I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The nights I stayed up studying while my parents helped Leela rehearse for cheerleading, the way my mother bragged about her TikTok videos but barely remembered what classes I was taking, the fact that I graduated 2 weeks earlier with honors, and neither of my parents bothered to show up. They said they had errands. Yet here they were celebrating Leela like she single-handedly held up the sky. The $2 became a symbol, a painful, humiliating summary of exactly where I stood in their world. After a long, suffocating moment, something inside me clicked. It wasn't anger. It wasn't a dramatic explosion. It was clarity. Cold, calm, sharp. I realized that if I stayed, nothing would change. I would always be the child they tolerated, not cherished. The child who earned everything but received nothing. So, I stood up, opened my closet, and slowly packed a small bag. A couple of shirts, my laptop, a notebook with ideas I had written for years, plans for a life I hadn't lived yet, a toothbrush. The picture of 6-year-old me smiling between both my parents, their arms around me, the last time I remembered their love feeling real. As I zipped up the bag, a flash of memory flashed through my mind. 10-year-old me crying because Leela had broken my science project on purpose, and my mother telling me, just let it go, she didn't mean it. But she did, and so did they. Their favoritism wasn't accidental. It was a choice, one they made over and over. With my bag on my shoulder, I walked downstairs. I could hear the laughter outside, the cheers, the honking, the selfies. No one noticed me walking through the living room. No one noticed me standing at the doorway. I realized then that they wouldn't notice if I disappeared from their lives entirely. I stepped out into the bright sunlight, walked past the brand new BMW, and headed toward the main road. My sister was too busy revving the engine to see me leave. My parents were too busy praising her to wonder where I was going. At the corner of the street, I pulled out my phone, opened the family group chat, and typed one final message. Don't worry, you won't have to pretend anymore. Then I blocked every number. No hesitation, no guilt. Just peace. I walked to the nearest bus station. I used the $2 to buy a cheap ticket to the city, 1 hour away, but an entirely different world. That bus ride felt like a funeral for the version of me who kept waiting for love that was never coming. I arrived with no plan, no friends, no backup. Just a bag, a bus ticket stub, and a heart that felt strangely light. I stayed the first night in a cheap hostel, sharing a room with strangers who didn't know my story and didn't care. It was messy, noisy, uncomfortable, but for the first time in my life, I felt safe. Safe from the feeling of not being enough. Over the next few months, I found a job at a small cafe. It didn't pay much, but it was mine. I worked long shifts, learned how to brew better coffee, took extra hours whenever possible. I saved every coin. I rented a tiny room with peeling wallpaper, a single bed, and a window that overlooked a noisy street. It wasn't beautiful, but it was freedom. Sometimes late at night, I would lie awake wondering if my parents ever realized I was gone, if they ever asked about me, if they ever regretted the way they treated me. But those thoughts grew weaker over time, like an old wound finally healing. I lived simply, worked steadily, and little by little, I started building the life I once dreamed of. I enrolled in night classes, I learned coding, I took small freelance projects. My world expanded, piece by piece, wider than anything I ever imagined in that suffocating house. 3 years later, I walked into a used car dealership. Not a fancy one, just a modest place with affordable cars lined up under the open sky. I tested a few, listened to engines, checked interiors, and then I bought one. Not new, not shiny, not wrapped in a red bow, but it started when I turned the key. It took me where I needed to go, and most importantly, I bought it myself. No applause, no celebration, just a quiet, steady pride blooming inside me. That night, I parked the car outside my little apartment, sat in the driver's seat, and let myself breathe. For a moment, I imagined driving back to my parents' house, pulling up in front, watching their shocked faces. But I didn't need that. I didn't need anything from them, not validation, not apologies, not explanations. I had already given myself the one thing they never could: freedom. Last month, I heard through a distant relative that Leela crashed the BMW and blamed everyone but herself. My parents apparently complained about how ungrateful she was becoming. They still don't know where I am. They never tried to find out. And I'm okay with that. Because leaving wasn't an escape, it was a beginning. And all it took was $2 and the courage to choose myself.